The radio went quiet, and in that silence a single whisper moved through the team like a blade through cloth. They sacrificed her. No one said it loudly. No one had to. Every man on the ridge felt it settle into his chest as they stared at the blinking icon on the tactical map, one blue dot, separated from the rest, fading in and out like a dying heartbeat. Her name was Lieutenant Mara Cole, the team's sniper, the one they jokingly called Ghostlight, because she moved through darkness without disturbing it. She was the smallest among them, quiet even by SEAL standards, with eyes that missed nothing and a calm that unnerved new operators. When the ambush exploded below the ridge and the extraction route collapsed into fire and chaos, Mara had already made the decision before anyone could argue. She took the long flank, the exposed trail, drawing heat away from the wounded and buying the team seconds they desperately needed. Seconds turned into minutes, minutes turned into silence, and then the radio went dead. Chief Rourke wanted to go back for her. Everyone did, but the valley had become a killing bowl, drones circling overhead, enemy patrols converging like sharks smelling blood. Command came down cold and final: hold position. Extract survivors. No re-entry. It was the kind of order that followed you into sleep and stayed there, heavy and accusing. As the helicopter lifted them away, the men watched the valley swallow the place where Mara had last transmitted. No body, no confirmation, just absence. Back at the forward base, grief took strange shapes. Some of them got angry, slamming lockers and blaming command. Others went quiet, eyes hollow, replaying every decision, every turn of the mission. Rourke sat alone in the operations room long after the debrief, staring at the map until it blurred. He remembered how Mara had once told him, during a rare moment of conversation, that fear wasn't the enemy, hesitation was. Fear keeps you alive, she'd said. Hesitation gets you killed. Now he wondered if hesitation would have saved her. For 3 days, the valley burned in their minds. Intelligence reported heavy enemy movement, propaganda chatter claiming a foreign hunt. No mention of a captured sniper. That silence hurt almost as much as confirmation would have. The team started speaking of her in the past, cautiously, like touching a bruise. They told stories they should have told her while she was alive, about impossible shots, about the way she steadied a shaking rookie's breath before his first real engagement. Each story ended the same way, trailing off into what-ifs. On the 4th night, as rain crawled down the base windows, the alarms screamed. At first it sounded like another drill. Then the perimeter sensors flared red, not from an attack, but from movement, one heat signature, crawling, staggering, refusing to stop. The guards raised rifles, voices sharp and uncertain. The figure collapsed just beyond the floodlights, mud-streaked, blood-darkened, barely recognizable as human. Medics ran. Rourke ran faster. It was her. Mara's face was drawn and pale beneath layers of grime. Her uniform was torn, her rifle gone, her hands raw and shaking. But her eyes were open, focused, burning with a stubborn light that refused to go out. As the medics worked, she grabbed Rourke's sleeve with surprising strength. "Did the team make it?" she asked, voice like gravel dragged across stone. "They did," he said, choking on the words. "Because of you." She closed her eyes then, not in relief, but in exhaustion so deep it looked like surrender. But she hadn't surrendered, not once. When she woke again, days later, the story came out in fragments. How she'd drawn the ambush farther than planned when the enemy adapted faster than expected. How her perch had been compromised, forcing her into a running fight through ravines and thorn scrub. She'd destroyed her radio to avoid being tracked, rationed water by the mouthful, stitched her own wounds in darkness. Once, she'd lain motionless for hours while enemy boots passed close enough to feel their vibrations in the dirt. Another time, she'd used the last of her ammunition to trigger a rockslide, burying a pursuit and sealing her own escape route at the same time. "You could have evaded earlier," one of the officers said quietly during the debrief. "Why didn't you break contact sooner?" Mara looked at him, steady and unflinching. "Because they needed time," she answered. "And I had it." The room went silent. Recovery was slow and brutal. Torn muscles, infection, a concussion that made light feel like knives. But the worst wounds weren't the ones the doctors charted. At night, Mara woke gasping, fingers curling as if still gripping a rifle. During the day, she kept to herself, watching the team from a distance, as if unsure she was still part of them. She'd heard the whisper, "They sacrificed her." It echoed louder in her own mind than it ever had among the others. Rourke finally confronted it one evening, finding her alone at the range, firing slow, deliberate shots as the sun bled into the horizon. "We didn't sacrifice you," he said. "We failed you." Mara lowered the rifle. "No," she replied softly. "You trusted me." "That's not the same thing." He didn't have an answer for that. Maybe there wasn't one. Weeks later, a new mission loomed: high risk, critical intelligence, the kind of operation that defined careers and broke them. Command hesitated to clear Mara for deployment. The medics worried. The psychologists worried more. Rourke worried, but he also watched her train, watched the way she moved with a precision sharpened by survival. She wasn't reckless. She was resolved. On the night of the operation, as the team geared up, one of the younger operators finally said what had been hanging in the air since the valley. "You don't have to prove anything," he told her. Mara met his gaze and smiled, small but real. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm going." The mission tested them in new ways: unexpected resistance, a collapsing structure, a moment where the only way forward was the kind of shot that lived on the edge of possibility. Mara took it without hesitation. The target fell. The path opened. The team moved as one, seamless, alive. When they came home this time, the helicopters didn't lift off, leaving anyone behind. Months later, at a quiet ceremony far from cameras, Mara stood beside her team as citations were read. When her name was called, the applause was subdued but fierce, the kind that came from shared understanding rather than spectacle. She didn't look triumphant. She looked grounded, anchored by something deeper than recognition. Afterward, as the sun dipped low, the team gathered on the tarmac. Someone finally said it out loud, the words that had haunted them since the valley. "We thought we lost you." Mara shook her head. "You didn't," she said. "You just couldn't see me." The whisper that had once carried guilt and sorrow lost its power then. It was replaced by something stronger, a truth forged in fear, trust, and survival. Sometimes sacrifice wasn't about being left behind. Sometimes it was about choosing to stand alone so others could stand together. And sometimes, against all odds, the one they thought was gone came back to remind them that courage doesn't always die in silence. Sometimes, it walks home, scarred and breathing, carrying the lesson that no one is disposable when they are willing to give everything for each other.